17-year-old girl living in Peterborough, carrying dreams of studying photography and plans to leave England to begin a new life, vanished after getting into a car with the very man she called her father. And from that day forward, every trace of her gradually became obscured by conflicting statements and disrupted data. So what truly happened during that brief window of time? Bernadette Walker, 17 years old, lived in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, England, and was a photography student at the local Peterborough College. A young woman with many plans and an entire future ahead of her. Bernadette Walker was born on December 13, 2002, and grew up in a large family with 8 siblings, living with her mother, Sarah Walker, and her stepfather, Scott Walker. She was particularly close to her brother Anthony, 20 years old, who described Bernadette as cheerful and energetic but rather reserved around strangers. And according to Anthony, the two had shared plans to save money so they could travel to the United States together in the future. Sarah had never officially married Scott, but continued to use his surname and gave that surname to the children. And although the relationship had ended and Sarah was seeing another man, Scott continued to live with the family in a 5-bedroom social housing home. According to public records, this man had a history involving domestic violence, including a conviction for harassment in 2002, a warning issued in 2008 for breaching a court order related to a previous relationship, and, according to information from the BBC, an arrest in 2012 connected to an incident involving harm to children. According to Anthony, one of Sarah Walker's 8 children, life in the household with stepfather Scott Walker was never stable, as he stated that this man frequently imposed forms of discipline that were intrusive and involved prolonged psychological pressure on him and his siblings. Anthony said that the children in the home repeatedly tried to ask Scott to leave the shared residence but were unsuccessful, as he was determined to stay. According to Anthony, when he was 19 years old, an incident occurred in which Scott directly caused serious harm to him, while the younger children were often subjected to even more severe impact. In addition, Scott's partner was also identified as having endured multiple serious forms of abuse, including issues related to major ethical violations and the crossing of personal boundaries. On July 16, 2020, Bernadette Walker, then 17 years old, decided to speak out in an effort to put an end to the harmful behavior that the man she called her father, and whose surname she carried, was alleged to have inflicted on her over a long period of time. Bernadette told her mother that Scott Walker had repeatedly crossed her personal boundaries over the course of several years and had secretly installed recording devices in private spaces. However, Sarah Walker did not accept these claims. The following day, Sarah believed it was necessary to ease the situation and arranged for Bernadette to stay overnight at the home of her paternal grandparents, Scott's parents. The next morning, just after 11 a.m., contrary to the concerns that had been raised only a day earlier, Scott himself arrived to pick up the teenager, and she left her grandparents' home to get into his Mercedes, with the stated destination being the family residence at Century Square, Millfield, Peterborough. Bernadette never returned to that address. And since July 18, 2020, no one in the family has seen her or been able to make direct contact with her again. However, it was not until July 21, 2020, 3 days after Bernadette Walker was no longer seen, that Sarah Walker contacted the police to report that she was unable to determine her daughter's whereabouts. Her first contact with authorities was made through an online support system, in which Sarah stated that she was seeking advice because her 17-year-old daughter was believed to have left home following an argument. After a brief exchange, the support staff advised her to call 101, the police non-emergency line, and as a result, at approximately 3:10 a.m., Sarah made a call that lasted nearly 50 minutes.
Cambridgeshire Police, how can we help?
Hiya, it's Mrs. Walker. I'm just ringing to report my 17-year-old daughter missing.
Okay, I'll get a report for you there. How long has she been missing?
Well, she ran away on Saturday lunchtime, but I knew where she was until she started messaging like 1 a.m. Yesterday morning.
Right. So she stopped messaging 1 a.m. yesterday morning?
Yeah, and I gave her the day to sort of stew it out a bit because it's not the first time she's done it.
Mm-hmm. And
then, of course, I've become aware of the fact that she's not where she told us she was. So obviously, that's why I'm phoning now.
No, that's fine. What we can do then for you is we can get that raised. Bear with me a second, and we'll start raising the missing from home report. Wait, so you last saw your daughter physically on the 16th, is that right?
Yeah, I saw her on the 16th. No, the 17th. I saw her on the 17th before she went to her grandparents. And then her dad picked her up on the 18th when she sort of jumped out the car and ran off.
Okay, so when's the last time either you or Dad see Bernadette?
It was around, I'd say, 1 p.m. on the Saturday the 18th.
Okay, and where was Bernadette at that point in time?
Where was it she jumped out the car and ran off from Scotland, I thought.
During this call, she stated that she was contacting authorities simply to report that her 17-year-old daughter's whereabouts were currently unknown. And when asked about the last time she had been in contact with her, she replied that Bernadette was believed to have left around lunchtime on Saturday and had continued texting until approximately 1 a.m. the previous day, with the final message stating that she was on her way back home. In her exchange with the dispatcher, Sarah Walker recounted the events of the preceding days and placed particular emphasis on the allegations her daughter had made against her stepfather, stating that she believed these claims were untrue. She explained that the delay in contacting the police was because this was not the first time Bernadette had left home, as she had previously left temporarily and then returned. According to Sarah, in one message, Bernadette said she was staying at her ex-boyfriend's house, and when asked whether she had personally called or gone to that address to verify this information, she replied that she had not, explaining that the boy's parents were Polish and did not speak English. However, Sarah also added that another person had asked the young man on her behalf about Bernadette's whereabouts and was told that she was not there. However, what truly occurred during the period from the moment Bernadette Walker left her grandparents' home to the point at which her mother reported being unable to determine her daughter's whereabouts has never been fully clarified. As the Walker family told police that after picking the teenager up from his parents' house, Scott Walker stopped the car in the Skaters Way area under the pretext of smoking, and during that time Bernadette was believed to have exited the vehicle and walked away from the scene, leaving her backpack behind. After the inability to contact her daughter was reported, Sarah Walker distributed flyers throughout Peterborough appealing for public assistance, describing Bernadette as a girl of average build with hair blending brown and strawberry blonde tones, facial piercings, and 2 self-made tattoos. At the same time, authorities began gathering information by speaking with her relatives and friends, reviewing communications from Bernadette's phone as well as those of family members, and examining her activity on social media platforms, which had shown no updates since the time her disappearance was reported. In the context in which Bernadette was believed to have left home voluntarily, investigators expected that she would soon make contact with at least one familiar friend. However, after a number of initial messages that were considered to show unusual signs, those friends reported that they received no further communication from Bernadette Walker. A few days after the inability to determine her daughter's whereabouts was reported, Sarah Walker spoke with a local media outlet, stating that her daily life had been severely affected, saying that she missed her daughter deeply and emphasizing Bernadette's absence from the family's everyday moments, while also expressing hope that she was temporarily staying at a friend's home. Sarah also said that she felt anxious about returning to the family residence amid police requests to continue working with the family, and maintained that at that time she could not envision any possibility other than the assumption that her daughter was with friends. On September 7, 2020, Sarah Walker posted a public message on Facebook addressed to Bernadette Walker, stating that police had come to the house to collect her daughter's hairbrush and toothbrush for verification purposes, while urging Bernadette to make contact to confirm that she was safe because the family, including her grandparents, were extremely worried. And the message ended with an affirmation of her love for her daughter. However, investigators later determined that for several weeks after Bernadette was no longer seen, Scott Walker and Sarah had actively created misleading signs to maintain the assumption that she was still living normally and had only left home temporarily. As the investigation progressed, police gradually pieced together data and statements, and although many details did not fully align and certain gaps could not be clarified, attention increasingly focused on Scott, and the possibility of a serious, deliberate incident began to be considered. Scott continued to insist that Bernadette had exited the car on her own when he stopped, but he was unable to provide a specific location where this was said to have occurred. While his movements after picking her up could not be traced because his phone was switched off for approximately 90 minutes. In contrast to the device connecting to cell towers in various locations both before and after that period. In addition, police established that within 48 hours after Bernadette was last seen, Scott and Sarah made multiple nighttime trips to a landfill site in rural Lincolnshire, an action believed to potentially be connected to the concealment of key traces related to the incident. On September 10, 2020, based on the materials and data gathered during the investigation, Scott Walker and Sarah Walker were taken into custody by authorities, and the following day, the investigative direction into Bernadette Walker's disappearance, which had been reported nearly 2 months earlier, officially entered a new phase when the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit launched an investigation into a serious incident despite no remains having been found. In announcing this decision, Detective Superintendent John Hutchinson of the Major Crime Unit stated that the shift in focus was prompted by the significant amount of time that had passed since Bernadette was last seen, along with growing concerns that she may have suffered serious harm, while emphasizing that although hope remained that she could still be found safe, law enforcement had to prepare for other possibilities and would work to establish a full account of what had occurred, while urging anyone with information about Bernadette's whereabouts to come forward and contact police to assist the investigation. On September 14, 2020, Sarah Walker and Scott Walker, then aged 37 and 50 respectively, were formally charged in connection with causing a serious tragedy involving their daughter, following a police search of the Walker family home in the Millfield area of Peterborough the previous day.
Full force.
Just bear with us, alright?
Yeah.
So that's this 5 minutes plus arrest with suspicion of sexual assault with a child, uncontrolled coercive behaviour. Okay.
Right.
Is that safe? They're
Right.
very harm to don't mention one question. Don't mention later on in court. Anything you do say, make it evidence. Okay.
Right.
Subject if you arrest is protected from your person. All right.
Right.
We'll get at the station. We'll explain
Yeah.
to you. Silence will explain to you what will happen from there.
Yeah.
Just see you.
Can I just see Sarah?
No,
Well,
not at
that's-
the moment.
No.
No.
We'll explain to her what's happened. So from now on, what do you review? Alright.
We'll explain to them once you get through.
No, no, but some kids.
I appreciate that. That's why I want to get you clearer here as quickly as possible.
And it's saying it's distressing, Scott, but what's your goodness for it's a procedure we're going through. Alright?
Yeah. I mean, we know about the accusations and stuff.
What you need to do is let my colleague give you a search, okay?
This is where we explore it properly, okay? We can tick off some boxes, etc.
Yeah.
Like,
Just remind you, Scott, you are under caution, so anything you do say, maybe you just
Sounds
get
like
yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll be able to have a smoke before.
we'll let you have a smoke before you go in, alright? Yeah, but take that on.
Alongside the legal proceedings, authorities concentrated significant resources on the search for Bernadette, deploying drones, police dogs, and specialist teams to examine farmland fields, and waterways across Cambridgeshire, while also expanding the search into neighbouring areas of Lincolnshire. However, by October 12, 2020, the operation was concluded without producing any confirmed results. Following the announcement of the charges, members of Bernadette's extended family expressed confusion and continued to hope that investigators had made an error in assessing the Walker family's role in her disappearance and the suspicions surrounding the case. On September 16, 2020, Sarah Walker and Scott Walker appeared before Peterborough Crown Court via video link. And during the brief hearing, both confirmed their identities before being remanded in custody to await a plea and trial hearing scheduled for November 2020. During this stage of the proceedings, Sarah Walker admitted to 2 charges related to perverting the course of justice, including using Bernadette's phone to send messages after the time she was last seen and providing inaccurate information to police about the circumstances, while Scott Walker denied all charges connected to causing a serious tragedy to Bernadette, as well as denying any actions intended to interfere with the investigation. On October 20, 2020, authorities announced that a further search would be carried out with a narrower focus, targeting abandoned structures located on land that had previously been searched. But this additional operation also concluded without yielding any confirmed results. The trial of Scott Walker and Sarah Walker at Cambridge Crown Court officially began on June 14, 2021, a point at which only about 1 month remained before the first anniversary of Bernadette Walker's disappearance. And over the course of 6 weeks of hearings, the jury heard the full progression of the investigation along with accounts from the defendants, who each presented their own narratives of what was said to have occurred on July 18, 2020, as well as in the days before and after. Prosecutors systematically reconstructed the couple's movements using GPS location data, mobile phone connection records, images of Scott's vehicle captured by security cameras, and police automatic number plate recognition data, thereby forming a sequence of events believed to be directly connected to the time Bernadette was last seen. Before Cambridge Crown Court, prosecutors argued that Scott Walker and Sarah Walker had acted together to conceal the circumstances surrounding their daughter's disappearance. While alleging that Scott had deliberately caused the serious tragedy in order to prevent Bernadette Walker from continuing to make allegations related to prior serious ethical violations. Prosecutor Lisa Wilding stated that Scott's phone had been switched off between 11:23 a.m. and 12:54 p.m. on July 18, 2020, and according to the prosecution's case, it was during this period of nearly 1.5 hours that the incident occurred, which left Bernadette with no chance of returning to a normal life. She further explained that immediately after the device was switched back on, the first call Scott made was to Bernadette's mother, and based on the sequence of data and subsequent actions, the prosecution concluded that this call was intended to seek assistance in concealing what had happened, and to construct a narrative designed to mislead investigators in the period that followed. According to the prosecution's argument, from that point onward, Scott Walker and Sarah Walker formed a deliberate coordination aimed at misleading and distorting the investigation into Bernadette Walker's disappearance, with authorities alleging that the two defendants unlawfully interfered with Bernadette's social media accounts to create the impression that she was still actively communicating with friends and family, specifically from Bernadette's Instagram account. A message was sent to friends shortly after 1 p.m. on July 18th, stating that she had left home and did not want to face trouble over earlier untrue statements. Subsequently, data showed that a text exchange took place between Bernadette's phone and Sarah's phone, even though at that time both devices were determined to be located inside the family home at Century Square, Millfield, Peterborough. Within this message chain, a message sent from Bernadette's phone asked whether her mother could forgive her, to which Sarah replied in a reassuring manner and suggested that she return home. After which, Bernadette was said to ask whether she would be in trouble and received a negative response before another message was sent stating that she would stay at a friend's house. According to the prosecution's summary, on the night of July 18, 2020, Scott Walker and Sarah Walker traveled together to a landfill site in a rural area, which investigators believed could be connected to the concealment of Bernadette Walker's personal belongings. And in the hours that followed, as well as over the subsequent days, Scott returned to this location multiple times, with some of those trips involving Sarah. When questioned about these events, Sarah stated that her former partner had exerted intense psychological pressure on her and compelled her to use her daughter's phone to send messages, while also deleting content in which Bernadette had previously described serious ethical violations committed by him. In her statement, Sarah also referred to Scott having engaged in harmful behavior toward members of the family and claimed that both she and her new partner had been subjected to threats in the period following Bernadette's disappearance. In her testimony, Sarah Walker stated that Scott Walker had appeared panicked at the prospect of facing imprisonment and repeatedly insisted that he was innocent, denying any inappropriate contact with Bernadette Walker, and Sarah said that at the time she believed these assertions. She also testified that she did not know what had truly occurred inside Scott's car on July 18th. When asked about the information her daughter had shared shortly before she disappeared, Sarah recalled that in a text message Bernadette had said her stepfather had crossed boundaries with her, had secretly installed recording devices in private spaces, and that the situation was becoming increasingly serious. However, Sarah testified that she could not believe these claims were true, because although she had suffered harm in her relationship with Scott, she believed he was incapable of committing similar acts against the children in the family. When asked about what she believed may have happened to Bernadette, Sarah replied that she accepted Scott could have caused harm to her daughter, but she refused to accept the conclusion that Bernadette was no longer alive. The court also heard testimony from police officer Elizabeth Ashton, who was involved in the early stages of the investigation and had contact with Scott Walker at the family home on July 23, 2020, during which she said Scott broke down in tears when speaking about Sarah Walker being in a new relationship with a man named Christopher O'Connell and suggested that the allegations Bernadette Walker had made may have been intended to force him out of the house so that Sarah's new partner could move in. Along the same line of argument, prosecutors stated that during interviews with police in early September 2020, Scott appeared primarily anxious about the risk of losing his relationship with Sarah, rather than focusing on Bernadette's disappearance. A point further reinforced by the fact that he claimed he could not remember the exact location where Bernadette was said to have left, while at the same time being able to sketch a relatively clear map of the surrounding area. Another detail the prosecution regarded as a key factor was the discovery of Bernadette Walker's backpack at the landfill site that Scott Walker was confirmed to have visited repeatedly, with prosecutors arguing that the location where this personal item was found carried significant weight in clarifying what had truly taken place. In addition to the backpack, investigators also recovered Bernadette's diary from the same area, in which she wrote that when she had previously told her mother about her stepfather's boundary-crossing behavior, she was dismissed, accused of being dishonest, and warned that she would face serious consequences if she went to the authorities. Within these entries, Bernadette also expressed her confusion and distress at not understanding why her mother did not believe what she had shared. Analysis of mobile phone data and online activity belonging to Bernadette's parents, as well as Bernadette herself, provided further notable information for the investigation, with detectives discovering that in the days following Bernadette's disappearance, Sarah Walker carried out several internet searches, including phrases suggesting suspicion that her partner might know exactly where her daughter was, along with content related to tracking the location of mobile devices. In addition, access records showed that Sarah repeatedly logged in and out of Bernadette's Facebook account to check activity. While from previously collected messages, investigators also established that Bernadette had told a friend that Scott Walker would no longer control her, and that she intended to inform the police about him having forced her to delete messages related to serious issues within the family. One of the witnesses called was Julie Walker, Bernadette Walker's grandmother, who was asked about her granddaughter's condition when Scott Walker brought her to stay at her home on July 17, 2020, and she said that Bernadette appeared deeply distressed, frequently in tears, and repeatedly stated that all she wanted was for her mother to believe what she had said. Although she did not wish to go into the substance of the allegations, the grandmother said Bernadette emphasized many times that she was not lying. Julie Walker recalled that her granddaughter later fell asleep on the sofa and remained there until the following morning, and that during the time Scott and Bernadette were in the house together before leaving, the teenager barely spoke and remained largely silent. In addition, the court heard testimony that some of Bernadette's friends had seen posts on her social media referring to her stepfather having crossed boundaries with her, with one friend stating that she read such a post shortly before it was deleted. This witness also testified that on July 20, 2020, she began receiving messages from Sarah Walker asking whether she had any information about Bernadette. And in those exchanges, Sarah said that for privacy reasons, she could not share details, but believed her daughter had left home, while asking the friend to pass on a message that she loved and missed her, before later sending another message stating that Bernadette had said things that were not true, and that this might be why she was unable to face returning home. On June 30, 2021, the jury was shown video footage of a police interview with Sarah Walker, in which she recounted that the last time she saw Bernadette Walker was just before she left, at which point she told her daughter that she loved her, and Bernadette hugged her while crying. The footage also showed Sarah's account of the events on the day Bernadette disappeared, stating that she attempted to contact Scott Walker at around 12:30 p.m., but the call went straight to voicemail. And it was not until approximately 1:45 p.m. that he returned the call, in a state described as breathing heavily. Sarah went on to say that when Scott returned home later that day, he appeared exhausted, tense, and agitated, and showed signs of panic and fear in response to what was unfolding. The jury also heard Scott Walker's account relating to aspects of the investigation, in which he admitted that he had installed recording equipment in the family bathroom and explained that his purpose in doing so was to verify his suspicion that Bernadette was hiding candy wrappers inside a toilet paper roll. However, during cross-examination in court, prosecutor Lisa Wilding argued that the device had been used to seriously violate Bernadette Walker's privacy, further alleging that the footage obtained had been transferred to a computer before being deleted. But Scott rejected all of these allegations and denied using the recording equipment for any inappropriate purpose. Finally, on September 10, 2021, Scott Walker, then aged 51, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years, while Sarah Walker, 38, was convicted of perverting the course of justice and received a 6-year prison sentence. In delivering the sentence, Maura McGowan stated that Scott Walker's refusal to cooperate with investigators by providing information about the location of the victim's remains meant that Bernadette Walker had been denied the most basic level of respect she deserved, and emphasized that the most devastating consequence was that many family members and friends would continue to live with the hope that Bernadette was still alive somewhere and might one day return. The judge also said that Bernadette's disappearance, a teenage girl who should have been protected within her own family, had deprived her friends of a vibrant companion and her siblings of a deeply cherished loved one. And when referring to the actions of her mother, she described them as conduct reflecting a level of selfishness that was difficult to accept. The prisoner's disclosure of information about victims Act, commonly known as Helen's Law, was enacted in the United Kingdom in January 2020, under which even if a prisoner may be eligible for parole on the basis that they are no longer assessed as a danger to the public, the parole board must still take into account the extent of that individual's cooperation with investigations, particularly whether they have provided information that helps clarify the fate of the victim. Authorities hoped that this legislation would create an opportunity for bereaved families to receive answers about what truly happened to their loved ones. By October 2021, Ian Sims, a man serving a life sentence in connection with a serious family tragedy, became the first case to be denied the possibility of parole under Helen's Law. After a jury returned an adverse verdict against him despite his continued denial of responsibility, and in circumstances where the victim's remains had never been found. Securing a conviction in serious cases where no remains are found is particularly difficult, which is why law enforcement and prosecutors are often cautious when deciding to bring such cases to trial. And according to analysis by Samantha Lundrigan, director of the Institute of Policing at Anglia Ruskin University, as cited in a BBC publication, physical remains are usually regarded as the most crucial evidence for confirming that a serious criminal act has occurred, while also providing extensive forensic information about how events unfolded and the role of the person responsible. However, she also acknowledged that in the modern context, the digital traces people leave behind through mobile phones, location data, and online activity have become key sources of information, sufficient to support complex investigations, such as the case involving Scott Walker. And in her view, had this incident occurred many years earlier, the case file would very likely not have met the threshold to be brought before a court. Although authorities have continued to keep the case open and persist in seeking Scott Walker's cooperation to clarify what happened to Bernadette Walker's remains. Experts note that in many similar cases, those responsible for serious tragedies often refuse to disclose the victim's location because withholding that information provides them with a certain sense of control. Following the sentencing, investigators continued to meet with Scott Walker in prison to ask him to provide information about where the remains were concealed. But these contacts yielded no concrete results. According to Detective Justine Jenkins, the absence of direct forensic evidence in the case file means that investigators can only advance the hypothesis that Bernadette may have suffered harm resulting in her having no chance to continue living, while the precise nature of what occurred can only be determined if her remains are found. And she emphasized that the investigation will not be closed. Meanwhile, although the family has gradually come to accept the possibility that Bernadette may no longer be present, they continue to hold on to hope based on the fact that no remains or related instruments have ever been discovered. And her brother, Anthony Walker, stated that he will continue seeking answers until the truth is fully brought to light. Bringing this case file to a close, the story of Bernadette Walker leaves behind a profound lesson about the importance of listening to, protecting, and believing young people when they speak out about instability within their own family environment. Because delay, doubt, or indifference can sometimes lead to irreversible consequences. Today's story is not merely a case file within the world of true crime documentary, but also a reminder of the responsibility of adults, communities, and systems to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Thank you for taking the time to follow and listen to this entire story. If you have any thoughts or emotions, please leave a comment below as a way to remember the victim. Don't forget to share the video so the story can reach a wider audience. Subscribe to the channel and press like to support True Crime Documentary in continuing to bring carefully researched and truthful case files. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next episode.